They say home is where the heart is, and when you have a lot of money, that place can be pretty much anywhere in the world. Rich people can afford any house that they want. Game rooms, ridiculously large pools, candy walls, you name it. When you have a lot of money, you can have any extravagant feature in your house that you want. However, there are some houses in the world that have some of these amazing features and still they don't get sold. And it's not like they're that expensive. I mean, there are people in the world who have enough money to buy some of these places. In fact, you don't have to be a millionaire to afford any of these homes. But there must be something that keeps people from buying these places. Today we're going to be looking at 10 mansions that no one wants to buy. With all that said and done, let's begin, shall we? Number 10. The house that's being watched. Imagine you move into your dream home, the nice home that you've always wanted with that nice yard, only to find out that you're constantly being watched. It doesn't exactly sound like a welcoming gesture, especially if you paid a very high price for that house. But this is what happened to the people who are now owners of this house in New Jersey. As soon as they purchased their home in 2014, they started to get letters from a mysterious entity stating that the house was under constant surveillance. Apparently, the responsibility to watch this house has been passed down across multiple generations, since the 1920s even. And these letters are anything but encouraging. In fact, they're pretty creepy, honestly. One of the notes actually asks the new owners if they want their house to be filled with young blood. That definitely sounds like the scenario of a rather twisted horror film, one that I'd hate to be a part of. Today, the house is again on the market. It was bought for only $1.4 million, but I'm sure the owners will be open to lower the price as long as you're okay with receiving some unwanted creepy letters. Number 9. The Victorian House. Many people dream of living in a Victorian-era house, and this dream became a reality for a very successful couple who had the money to buy this house. But of course, things ended quite harshly for them as the husband ended his wife's life when he found out that she was ready to leave him. The event was quite devastating and horrific, but the man served his time in prison. He claimed that he had mental health problems that made him do what he did. The house was then put on the market, and of course the real estate agents did not want to mention the awful things that happened in this place. I mean, the woman died in the master bedroom. I can't imagine anyone wanting to buy this house after knowing that info. We do gotta admit though, this house is beautiful. It has a ton of space, and it still holds the looks of its Victorian glory. But it seems like the place will work better as a museum than as a living space. Number 8. Granite Loma. Some places are just not meant to be sold, and sometimes the reason is simply that no one is interested, even when we're talking about the largest log cabin in the world. That is the case of Granite Loma, a beautiful place in Lake Superior, Michigan. This property is considered to be the biggest log cabin in the US. It is surrounded by a lush forest and a nice lake. Inside you can find all sorts of fancy furniture, a very efficient kitchen, and a lot of rooms with amazing views of the lake. Recently, the property was listed at $20 million, which is about 50% lower than its original price. Granite Loma was even listed in the National Register of Historical Places in 1991, but none of these features make anyone interested in buying it. Perhaps it might be the fact that the place is a bit remote and is pretty old. It was built about 100 years ago. It seems like people prefer their traditional small cabins in more populated areas than a large and old log cabin in the middle of nowhere. Number 7. A former haunted house. Some houses are unexplainably hard to sell, but others seem to just be trying hard to stay unsold forever. That is the case at this house in Detroit, Michigan, which is known to be a place where getting houses is pretty cheap. This mansion is less than $20,000. It has 4 bedrooms and an outstanding colonial look. The real question here is, how come no one seems interested in buying it? Well, the place used to be a haunted house. Yes, one of those that people visit for Halloween parties. It doesn't mean that there's a ghost inside the house or anything like that, it just means that the house was decorated in a way that would attract people to visit every year for Halloween. Unfortunately, the person trying to sell the house hasn't made any effort towards improving the place. When you look at the interior of the house, you can even spot some red writing on the walls, a phrase that reads, "You will die." Yeah, that's definitely not welcoming at all. It is just red paint though, but I doubt anyone would be interested in buying this home just by looking at this spooky interior. Number 6. The Doll Mansion. And here's another house that could use some renovations before going into the market. When you look at it from outside, this mansion is beautiful. In fact, even too beautiful for a price of $1.275 million. This is a very low price tag compared to other similar mansions. But when you look inside, you can kinda see why nobody's clamoring to pay for this place. The mansion is decorated with all sorts of mannequins and dolls that give the place an unwelcoming, eerie look. These mannequin dolls are all over the house, in random corners and everywhere else, as if they were kind of the inhabitants of the mansion. Some of them even have their heads cut off, which just kinda adds to the sinister look of the place. Perhaps getting rid of these mannequins would make the listing more appealing for anyone who's interested in becoming the owner of this home. You know, just a suggestion. Number 5.
The most mysterious death of the 21st century. This is the mecca of paranormal investigating. The Cecil Hotel. This place has seen serial killers, devil worshipping, hauntings at a whole other level.
The Party Mansion. Who can say no to a party mansion? Well, apparently pretty much anyone who actually knows about what kind of parties fashion designer Halston used to host at his Upper East Side penthouse in New York City. I'm really not going to go into much detail here, but let's just say that Halston had people do some activities that would make a lot of people feel uncomfortable, and get us demonetized. His activities were bad enough to give the place a bad rep. It has a 2-story filled bamboo greenhouse and an amazing rooftop terrace, and even catwalks to remind us that he was in the world of fashion. The place itself is considered a piece of art, and it's a reflection of Halston's life work. Yet no one familiar with this icon is interested in buying the property. While it was originally listed at $38.5 million, it now dropped to a value of $24 million. And still, no one seems inclined to become the new owner of this penthouse. I guess the party's over for good, and it's honestly for the better. Number 4. A Poet's Home. Artists and writers have been raised in some of the most interesting homes in the world. Some of them had very humble beginnings, and some of them were born into a rather luxurious lifestyle. Some of them, however, were raised in homes that are now famous, and not necessarily for good reasons. And that is the case of the house in which Conrad Aiken grew up. This American poet was raised in Savannah, Georgia with his siblings. But on February 27th of 1901, his father, who was a respected eye surgeon, murdered his wife and then committed suicide. The one who found them was poor young Conrad Aiken, and it's definitely an event that changed his life forever. He had to move with his great aunt and his uncle, and the house has now been empty, which is honestly pretty understandable. I'm sure many of us dream of living homes that were occupied by famous writers, but this is not one of those places. Number 3. The Kreischner House. The Kreischner House was one of 2 mansions that a German immigrant built for his sons in Staten Island, New York City, before the beginning of the 20th century. However, the other house didn't survive the Great Depression, and the one that remained had a very dark outcome. This one was built by Edward B. Kreischner, who shot himself while in the house. After the awful incident, there were numerous claims that the ghost of Edward stayed in the house, haunting visitors. People who visited said they heard voices and experienced other supernatural happenings while in the house. In 1998, someone bought the house with the hopes of restoring it and putting it up for sale. 10 years later, in 2008, a man named Joe Black was appointed as the caretaker of the house. But what people didn't know was that Joe was a hitman. He worked for the mafia, and he actually murdered someone while being in the property. He, of course, was sent to prison and brought more bad rep for the already infamous mansion. Now it's time for the day's best pick. The picture I chose for today shows a house that can be moved. It's a very ambitious project, and I'm sure many people want to own one of these someday. Just imagine being able to move your house to different parts of the ocean. Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? There once was another house in the world that could also be moved, and it only cost $10, and yet no one decided to buy it. Let's check it out with number 2. The $10 Mansion. How much would you pay for a mansion? Millions of dollars? Thousands of dollars? Hundreds of dollars? Well, what if the mansion was only $10? I'm sure you would be interested, but I'm sure you'd know there's a catch to such a cheap property. And you would be right. The $10 mansion in Montclair, New Jersey was listed for only $10 with the hopes of finding someone to move it from its original location. Yes, that's right. The owner of the land wanted to get rid of the house while still keeping the land. For that reason, they listed the property for only $10, hoping that someone out there would come and buy the house to later move it to a new location. Unfortunately, no one was interested in doing this. Moving historical buildings from their original location does sound odd, but it actually is possible. It's just a ton of work. In the end, the house had to be demolished, and that is a waste. Honestly, I would have bought it, and then I would have put it where my house is now, giving my HOA a good old heart attack. Before we move on, do me a favor. My analytics show that only about 15% of you watching are actually subscribed. Come on guys, what's up with that? Can you guys please hit the subscribe button? You guys watch my videos every day anyway, so you might as well subscribe and keep up to date with every video we put out. Number 1.
Manscaped. Manscaped.
What?
I'm saying Manscaped.
Ah! Who are you? What is going on?
Save it. I'm the grooming guru, and I'm here to rescue you.
From this island?
1. The 1875 mansion. At the top of the list, we have a mansion that is selling for a very cheap price. The house was built in 1875 and it keeps a Victorian-era look. Has 10 bedrooms, high ceilings, marble fireplaces, and a lot of amenities that are very well taken care of. If vintage is your style, then this house might be a perfect match for you. And it only costs $329,000. That's actually really cheap, mind you. That's not even $500,000. It's also in Gardner, Massachusetts, a place with a low crime rate. It is a pretty good deal. Unfortunately, this house is also known as the most haunted place in all of New England. That's right, I'm not talking about one state, but about a whole region in the United States. Former inhabitants of this house claim to have seen ghosts, shadows, and they even heard voices calling out their names. No wonder the place has been featured in numerous TV shows about haunted places. The house looks amazing, but I doubt anyone would enjoy